Welcome back to Not a Straight Line with me, Pete Daly-Dickson. This is the show that explores the non-linear journeys of artists and entrepreneurs to inspire you as you zigzag through your own non-straight line life. And this week, I'm joined by Parsons, the no-nonsense business coach and marketing mentor for female founders. Her title really matters. It perfectly captures what she's about, which resonated deeply with me, and you'll hear Del get quite emotional about it too towards the end. Del helps women in business reach their full potential, something she credits to parents who never limited her dreams. This foundation led to impressive career success and, like so many of us, the eventual burnout that forced a rethink. Drawing from psychology, sociology, and marketing, Del has found her true purpose and has created a life that lets her be fully present for her family. We explore the twists and turns of her journey, and I think you'll come away feeling inspired about what might be possible in your own life. Listen on and enjoy. As with the start of all these episodes, we'll just do a short breathing exercise. They're called physiological sighs. So we'll close our eyes, the three of us, and we'll breathe in twice through the nose, hold it for a beat, and then breathe out through the mouth. And we'll just do that 3 times, and then we'll walk together up to the top diving board and we'll jump into the conversation. So if we just want to close our eyes and breathe in twice through the nose. One last time. Well, Del Parsons, your dog beat us to the introduction. Welcome to Not a Straight Line.
Thank you. Such a nightmare. It's the pre-Christmas deliveries, honestly, every single time.
He's welcome to join the conversation anytime he likes. It's not an issue. Joking apart though, Del, welcome to Not a Straight Line. It's such a joy to be here in conversation with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just to help me and the listener out from a geographical perspective, where are you in this wonderful big wide world of ours?
So I am based in a lovely, very quaint named Lancashire village called Whittle Woods.
Okay.
So it is very near a market town called Chorley, and Chorley is north of Bolton, south of Preston. And lots of people know of Chorley because of the whole Chorley FM thing that was brought to life from Peter Kay, who originates from the area. Bolton's about maybe 3-4 miles down the road from where we are.
So kind of over on the western side of England.
It's nice. It's rural. There's a good, strong community here. But I'm not from this area originally, and neither is my husband. So we kind of just ended up here, if you like.
Well, that sounds like a zag that needs exploring at some point in the conversation. But before we go there, let's go to the first question that I sent you by email a couple of days ago. When you read that and you saw that, I know you've already shared with me before we hit record that loads of things came to you, which they often do for my guests. Which one stands out for you the most, which is where you want to dive into the conversation?
The thing that has been the catalyst, although I didn't know it at the time, because looking back, you always see things that you didn't see when you're in the midst of things happening. But it was definitely becoming a mum. That was the number one thing that shifted my life to where it is now. For sure it is.
And when did that happen?
August 2009. I had to think then about when my son was born. It's really bad, isn't it? But yes, August 2009 was said time. And it took probably maybe 4 years thereafter for me to get to a point where I was like, right, I know what I want to do.
So you have a fully fledged teenager in the house now.
Yeah, year 11, teenager at school. My son has what the professionals like to call complex needs. So he's got autism, dyslexia, sensory processing disorder. So that has been quite a journey for us to go on.
Mm.
But yeah, we are full on in year 11 exam, full onness, if that's even a word.
Well, if it wasn't before, it is now.
Yes, totally that. But he's just finished his mocks like yesterday actually, and he's just tired, like there's so much pressure and he keeps saying, I'm really chilled about it. I'm fine. And I can do what I can do and I've revised. But I think it's just the whole narrative around it. And, teachers are on at them every single day about how much revision they should do, what he wants to do next. He's 15. He's a young 15 as well. So, yeah.
Did you always want to be a mum?
That's an interesting question. Probably not really. It wasn't my thing that I must do. So I grew up in Anglesey in North Wales. There was my mum and dad, me and my younger sister. My sister's about 3.5 years younger than me. And I grew up with both of my parents working at the local university, and my dad was a real champion of us as girls. The narrative that we had as kids was very much along the lines of course you can do it. Like anything you want to do, yes, you can do it. You want to ride a horse, you want to ride a motorbike, go and do it.
You want to be an astronaut?
Yeah, it was that sort of thing. I wasn't ever, and I can't even recall my parents saying to me, you can't do that. What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. And it was brilliant. But again, in hindsight, I felt as a teenager going through the exam thing as my son is now, a little bit of an unwritten pressure about it, more so for me as the older sibling than my sister, that I had to study hard to do the things that I wanted to do and to get where I wanted to be and to have this career that my dad knew that we could be capable of achieving, because my parents didn't grow up in that way, but they were exposed to it, I guess, from a university life, working and living and working with people from different cultures and different backgrounds. My mum and dad saw that opportunity for us. So I sort of felt some pressure, and that led into me taking the very normal pathway for kids that grew up in the way that I did, I guess, back in early 90s, to go and do my A-levels, to go to university. But I dropped out of the first university I went to, and I rang my dad and said, I can't do it. Please, can you come and get me?
I want to just put a flag in the sand there, that little bit there, and just circle back to what you're saying, because it seems the epitome of irony to be brought up in an environment where you are told you can be and do anything that you want, and yet that your individual psychological pressure, plus maybe other pressures which we might explore, forced, in inverted commas, you down the same route as everyone else. And one of the things I find so interesting from what you said is, a few months ago I had a conversation with somebody else on the podcast, and he said exactly the same thing. His parents brought him up in an environment where he said almost exactly the same words as you did, Del. You can be anything, you can do anything. And yet he also shared this same sense of pressure to excel when that wasn't given from anyone others.
And I think that was intentional, more so from my dad rather than my mum. He would never have wanted to put that pressure on us.
Yeah.
But again, we grow up in a society and in a way that we want to do well, and we have that reward when we're small people at primary school, well done, you've got the golden star, you've worked really hard and you've remembered your spellings. That's all reinforced along the way. So, when I got to that point, I don't think if I was to have that conversation now with my dad would be like, oh my goodness, that's not what I wanted. I wanted you to know that, all of this is possible for you and we will support you in the best way that we can. I think the nature of other things that you're exposed to and how that's stacked up as you grow up as a young child, it definitely has an impact. But that time,
I'm just fascinated by this. So, what other things do you think there are? Where do you think that pressure came from?
I think there is a pressure at school. So my first language is Welsh.
I wish I could say something in Welsh to you. Teach me. Teach me some Welsh now. Teach me and the listeners some Welsh.
I've been doing this in the car on the way to school recently. So Thomas is 15 and he's never been like, oh, I'm English because he was born in Preston. I don't want to learn Welsh. But recently he's been like, can you teach me some Welsh? So the first thing that we learn to say are, like if you're learning French or whatever language, we say good morning, and that is bore da.
Bore da.
Mm.
Bore da.
Bore da. And then we say something, ask somebody how they are, and you would say sut dach chi.
Sut dach chi.
Yeah, perfect. And I keep saying to Thomas, you need to move your mouth to speak Welsh. You need to be able to roll your R's and say and things like that.
So how does good morning, how are you sound like just as in one sentence like you?
Bore da sut dach chi.
Bore da sut dach chi.
Yeah. See, when you speed up, it gets more tricky.
So how long have you not been in Wales? Because you haven't got like an archetypal Welsh accent.
No, I can switch it on though.
Go on. I love it.
I could talk like this if I was still living back in Anglesey. But that's not how, again, we were brought up. We were brought up that way. So back in school, there was this thing of like Welsh kids and English speaking kids all the way from primary school. We were, what's the word for it? Like separated, I guess, at secondary school. Wow. And there used to be this thing of like Welsh kids and English kids. And there used to be the whole thing of like, kids call each other's names and all of this, that, and the other. But the Welsh community that I had was very tight. So in terms of numbers, that Welsh-speaking community is much smaller than the English-speaking community. Yeah, so like in my school, we had 2 forms of 28, 30 kids speaking Welsh and 7 of English-speaking kids.
Okay.
So there's like a real disparity. So our peers, our like Welsh-speaking peers, you wanted to do well because we wanted to showcase this thing that we can do it and that it was just naturally reinforced. I remember at school, being brought up because I was one of the eldest at primary school and I would be the one that would like be showcased, if you like, in the Christmas show. And come on, you're the oldest, you can sing. Or like, come on, you're the oldest, you need to read. Or, those kind of things all layered up. And it would be reinforced because people would say, oh, you're so good. Like, so well done. And you read beautifully, and we've got this thing in Welsh called the Eisteddfod that you might have heard of.
I have. It's in different places, isn't it?
Yeah.
Around,
so it's like a singing, music, dancing Celtic festival, if you like, or the Arts Festival of Wales. And again, from like being knee high, you compete at the Eisteddfod. They have an Eisteddfod for kids and they have local Eisteddfods and they have a national Eisteddfod. So we grew up in that way. Like, come on, you need to represent the school, and you can play piano and you can do this. And so it's just how it was.
And did you enjoy all those things? The reading and the speaking. What really sort of lit you up at school?
Oh, what lit me up at school? I liked doing well at school. I liked that reassurance and that reward. Because I remember going back to the Eisteddfod conversation, must have been like, I don't know, 8 or 9, something like that, right? So it's very intertwined with like the Christian movement in Wales. So there was this Eisteddfod going on, and they were like, "Come on, you can play piano." And it was my turn to come up, then my go in the competition to play this piece on the piano, and I just couldn't play it, even though I practiced and practiced and practiced, and my hands were shaking, and I got to like, I don't know, the second bit of the piano piece, and I was like, I can't do it, and I was crying. And that was a moment for me. I remember that really vividly. And then there was that. There was, I remember standing up at school as well and not knowing my times tables. I'm still not great at mental maths. So please don't ask me any math questions. But again, I couldn't remember my maths. And that was another instant that sticks in my mind where I couldn't do something. So when I went to university after working really hard, doing all the things, listening to my mum and dad say, study really hard. And then that first point that I went to Liverpool And I'd gone straight after A-levels, did really well in my A-levels, got to university. I was like, I'm on my own in a city that I don't know. I don't like it. And it took me maybe 6 weeks to ring my dad from the campus phone box, as it were. Like, we didn't have mobile phones.
What did you say?
Like, I can't do it. I need you to come and get me. And I was kind of so teary on the phone, and my dad was there, maybe a couple of hours. He'd just jumped in the car, I'd left work, jumped in the car and come and get me.
Did you have any sense internally of having to pluck up the courage to have that conversation? Talk us through that. What was that like for you?
Oh, I don't know. I'm talking, 1994, maybe 95, that happened. I just did it. I can't recall now overthinking making that phone call, because I was in the situation, my emotion had taken over, and I knew I could rely, because we'd grown up in a really tight household of the four of us. And I just rang. And I think it was afterwards that affected me more, because at Christmas, when all your pals from school come home and they're like, oh, how are you getting on? And Cardiff is great, and Aberystwyth is brilliant, and I'm at Manchester and this is amazing, and I've met this boy and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm back home working as a waitress, not in a cocktail bar, in a pub.
Good song reference there. What was that journey like home from Liverpool to Anglesey with your dad?
It was horrible. I can't remember us having a conversation there. I think it was probably a very quiet kind of journey back. And again, it was my dad in that sort of year before I went back to university. In that year, I worked, like I say, in this pub that was local to us. And my dad said, I think you could go back to a further education college. And it makes me sound really old. I probably am old, just people listening to this. But he was like, get a skill, be able to type or be able to transcribe something. So I went back to the local further education college and did I can't even remember what the qualification was. It might have been a business admin type qualification. And then I went and did some temping through a local temping agency, and then sort of job hopped a little bit for that sort of 9-10 months before I went back to university and did a psychology degree.
So what were you studying? What did you study at Liverpool first time?
I did French.
Okay.
Because I was really good at languages, and particularly French and Spanish, some of the European languages stack up in the same way as Welsh does. So I was really good at that. And because I was quite interested in media and communication, because of growing up in this very tight Welsh community, it was accessible to us. I knew people who were working in the media, Welsh broadcast. There's a channel called S4C that you might have heard of. That felt really close and achievable to me at the time. So I studied French and media studies. And I don't know why I chose that in hindsight, but the French thing was really hard because, and this is sometimes a little bit tricky for people to get their head around, my education was in Welsh. So when they teach in Welsh. Okay, so apart from English, because we grew up bilingually. I've always been able to speak English and Welsh. But maths was taught in Welsh. Science was taught in Welsh. French was taught in Welsh. So when I went to university, although I'm bilingual and can flip really easily between two, I'd never been taught French in English before. And I'd never really understood some of the grammatical terms. And the thing that sticks out in my head is this lecturer was talking about some French text, and she was talking about clauses in sentences. I had no idea what on earth she was talking about when she was talking about clauses in sentences.
And not Santa Clauses, presumably.
No, yeah. It was like a 2 times translation for me in some instances.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was whoa, this is a bit too much.
Was it just that kind of academic, the dissonance between your expectation of what that course would be and what it was, or was it also the being in a place that you didn't know?
Yeah.
Because that latter is the same for everybody that goes away to university.
And I didn't like it, And again, going back to the way that we were brought up, I remember going on holiday all of the time with my mum and dad, or we would spend the weekends together. Like, I didn't ever think in my kind of formative years, if you like, rebel against my parents. Like, that was never it. So it felt like it was a big thing for me to move away. And the second time I went to university to do psychology, I chose to go back to Bangor. And I lived separately I didn't live at home with my mum and dad. I had a place in student accommodation, and then I moved in with some pals that I'd met at university.
Is that close to where
Yeah,
you're?
so it's the university where my mum and dad both used to work.
Okay.
Weren't in the psychology department. So, I was a little bit far away from that, but it felt like I was ready to go, but I still needed something back, something to tie me back there. And I definitely wasn't ready at 18 to go to university. Absolutely no chance I was.
We age and mature differently, don't we? It's one of my pet peeves with the education, the institutionalized education system, is that a child's birth date is the thing that dictates where their position on the conveyor belt.
Because my son's the 2nd of August. So he's young in his year 11. So he'll actually leave school before he's 16, technically.
Yeah.
His GCSEs will finish, mid-June probably. And I think, he's a different character, but he'll say now, we were talking about it last night, actually, over dinner. And we were saying, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, well, I'm going to move away from here and I don't want to go anywhere busy. And we were like, right, okay, well, where do you fancy moving to? And he's like, Sweden. He's never been to Sweden in his whole life. We're like, right, okay, well, what if you can't go to Sweden? And he was like, north of Scotland. And then we were kind of giggling about this plan. And we were saying, what will you do as a job? And he's like, I'll find a job. So he's very, I think the experiences that he's had in the education system have been very different to mine. And he's got this resilience and this tenacity that I greatly admire about him. He's just a magical kid.
Well, you can tell Thomas, is it?
Yeah.
You can tell Thomas from me that those are two solid choices. My brother and his family live in Sweden. He married a Swedish girl. He's lived there for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I was married in Scotland. My wife and I have a strong affinity there, and I've worked in Scotland. And the north of Scotland is, So if my endorsement counts for anything, then consider it given.
Character, I think very differently to me, I've needed that reassurance. And as I've kind of progressed in my career and I've, been able to have some of that nice profiling stuff that we do in corporate organizations sometimes, have some more understanding of why I need those kind of things in my life. Whereas he's a very different character. He doesn't need any external reassurance. He knows who he is for sure, even at 15.
That's wonderful. I think there's an element of me still figuring out even now. I just turned 56 yesterday. So why psychology? What happened in those 10 months that led you to?
One of my A-levels was sociology, and I got a good grade at A-level. And I didn't have a desire to progress in any particular field. I didn't want to be like a lawyer. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. So didn't do a B.Ed. I didn't want to do medicine, like sciences wasn't my thing. So I was like, actually, that seems quite interesting. I enjoyed sociology. Like, let's do this. Because at the time it was like, let's get a degree because that's the thing that everybody does. And there was no more to it than that.
I know you said you knew what you didn't want. Did you have any sense of what you did want from a career or anything? You just knew you were just going to do the next step, and a bit like Thomas was saying, you figure it out when you get there.
I'd done I can't remember how it came about. Maybe it was part of those kind of admin jobs that I did in that 10 months. Because one of them was for, it was like an employment consultant within the water board. And we'd set up like a little office within there because they were making people redundant. And it was about helping people and supporting them through that redundancy process, kind of re-educating them or, developing additional skills. And there was lots of conversation about marketing, and I'd done some work experience in various places and done like marketing stuff. here, can you like have a look at this brochure type thing? Or, can you write some emails for us? That kind of thing. But again, it was just a next step thing. Let's do this. We can have a good time for 3 years at university, and then we'll see what happens.
I do want to just go back a little bit. And in that 10 months where you said you had jobs and you said your former classmates were coming back from university, did you have any sense of failure internally?
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a shame around it.
Tell me about that.
Because I guess I wasn't used to failing. So that was like my first lesson in failing. And that, it's like, oh my God, like this is a big thing. Let my mum and dad down. What am I going to do next? People are going to think that this, that, and the other about me. It was a lot of internalizing it to some point. But again, my mum and dad were like, right, come on then, what are we going to do now? It wasn't I can't recall it being a period in my life where I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I didn't ruminate a lot about it. That feeling was definitely there, but it wasn't something I think that held me back that year. It was just, right, now what do we need to do? It's not like I'm not ever going to go to university, but probably from I don't know, maybe the October when I dropped out to the Christmas, that was like a bit of a uncertain period, I think, especially when pals came back and we're going out celebrating Christmas, they're like, oh, what are you up to? How is it? I'm like, oh, I've sacked it all off.
And how did they respond?
Oh, right. Shocked, I guess, was the main thing, because they wouldn't expect it from somebody like me, which is interesting because I know, again, I didn't know at the time, but now I know I need that validation externally from people. Like if you're familiar with DISC, I'm a very high I. Like that's my natural state. That's how I appear in work. I need that stuff.
I was going to say, is it still need, or is it more past tense?
It's parts of me still need it. Yeah, for sure. But I recognize it now, and it's not as ingrained in me.
Mm. You're doing really well in this conversation, by the way.
Yeah, I can move it out of there, if that makes sense. But I couldn't at the time, because I would think, oh God, they must think I'm stupid, that I can't cope with university. I'm not going to be able to fulfill all of these things that I know is possible because I've dropped out. I'm one of those that drop out. It's those kind of internal conversations.
Well, do you think that was partly what led you to psychology, to kind of figure out why you were thinking those kind of things, or was it not as deep as that?
Maybe unconsciously, perhaps, but in what I can recall and what I remember, it was literally that seems quite interesting. I'm quite good at sociology, got a good grade, let's do it.
And did you learn anything on that degree that helped you either reframe or see that failure in inverted commas in a different light?
Not on that undergraduate course, no. Because I'm very much like how I'd grown up and how I'd manage the process of navigating education, if you like. It was like a process. So we get taught this, we study that, we do this to write an essay or a dissertation or, whatever the piece of work was, the assignment. And then we do that. We hand it in, we get a mark, off we go next. Me now, I would be looking for every single bit of it. Like, how can I use that to fit into something else? But at the time, I'd only just turned 19. I was like, right, this is how we do education. Yeah, we go to lectures, we go to tutorials, we write a load of notes, we revise it. And I was very good when I was younger at being able to learn things like verbatim. So I could quote large pieces of text, or I could recall what was in there. And I think that's probably from the stuff that I had to do, like presenting and reading out pieces when I was at primary school and all the way through. I had that skill set. So I found it pretty straightforward. I didn't struggle.
You've mentioned a couple of times about what you're doing now, and I know that we've just got to university time, and I know that there's a corporate bit in there as well, because you've mentioned that. But let's fast forward to where you are now and what you're doing, because you mentioned it, what are you doing now, I guess, from a work perspective, if not from anything else?
I love what I do now. I absolutely thrive on it. It absolutely lights my soul up. It was what I'm meant to be doing. And the way I describe that is that I have this mission to give female founders the skills, the confidence, and the self-belief to build a bloody brilliant business and still be able to live the life that they absolutely love.
I wish I was a female founder.
Yeah, I love it. Like every time I say it, I get like a real shiver down me because I know that is the thing that I am meant to be doing.
How do you know that?
Because how do I know? I've got this real grounding. So I'm a big feeling person. Okay. So I feel it, and I talk about feeling things like in my bones. It's deep inside. And I feel this real grounded sense. Like if I was to stand up, I have to stand up. My feet are placed really firmly on the floor. My shoulders are down. That's how I present myself. Like I don't have this rush and this anxiety around it. I'm very solid in my belief, and there's lots of evidence to support it, that there's skills gaps and various different things. But I know that the experiences that I've had, the journey, like that I've been on, it's really valuable. I have this valuable skill, and I feel that it's my duty to be supporting other people to help them develop that skill so that they can be the best version of the business owner that they want to be.
You used the word skill in its singular form there. You don't, not skill. So, and I'm sure that's deliberate, maybe not. But so if it is down to a skill that you have, what is that skill?
Yes, very interesting. So I think the skill around it, the number one thing that I see is that successful people or entrepreneurs or business owners, whatever you want to call it, not solely female founders, okay? But it's their ability to trust and to trust in themselves, to take the risks, to make the decisions. The skills, you can learn a skill. The process of building a business, it's a very logical process. But when you start throwing humans into the mix, clients, us, our beliefs, our values, it's very, very interesting. So the one thing, if I could distill it down to it, would be that same inner knowing, like having real clarity and understanding of who you are, the value that you bring, and how that impacts on all of the other things. There's so many people that just build a business and they're like, what am I doing? This isn't what I wanted. Now I've got all of these people that are relying on me, and they get to a point where they hate their business.
So it's almost so trust, more specifically self-trust, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Like their ability to make decisions, but that ability to make decisions comes from you having clarity on where you're going, which is a skill in itself, and being able to understand the numbers within your business so that you can make the decisions, being able to understand people and have this emotional intelligence that is talked about so much at the moment, particularly in leadership circles. So those individual things all melee together to build the thing that you want. It's really powerful.
In that beautiful, succinct explanation of what you're doing, and it begs greater exploration. So we will come back to it. You used the word success or successful. You said, successful business people, not necessarily female founders. Success is often seen as the other side of failure. And we've touched on failure a little bit earlier on, the sense of shame you had around dropping out of university. What the fuck does success mean?
Well, that's it, isn't it? That's the golden question. And I think, for me on a personal level, that is it, that I'm making an impact. Okay. I like knowing that. That's the I in my disc profile coming out. I like knowing that somebody's saying, oh my God, that conversation with you, or what you showed me has made this impact. and the ripple effect that that can have. That for me is joyful. Secondly, if I had that, but none of my close relationships. So like for me, one of the most important things is the three of us in our household. So there's me, Craig, my husband, and my son. I don't need anything else. And I think, when I have these kind of conversations with people, that period in 2020, when it was all like chaotic, everything could have gone. But I know I'm good because I have a real understanding of who I am now. And I understand the value that I bring to things. And I know that I trust myself enough to make those decisions. Like one of the episodes of this podcast that I listened to before was saying about, like something always happens, right? We take a risk in the same way as I took a risk. I handed in my notice, said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to start a business. People think you're mental. Like the other risk I took, I swapped a corporate, really nice job, really good salary, nice bonus, nice car, nice traveling, all of that stuff that looks nice from the outside. Like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. There's so many of us that do it, but it feels really scary. And I think if you don't have that inner knowing or that self-trust or, understanding of who you are and the value that you bring, those kind of decisions do feel like you are
in a way, it's a similar kind of decision to the one that you made when you were 18 and you decided to drop out. So it's almost like you had a chance to rehearse it. But if you've never failed, in inverted commas, you've always done the thing that expected and moved on, that making those, that the older you get, the harder it becomes to become who you really are.
Yeah. And like, kind of looping back around and taking this conversation to, you might need to bring me back in. But like you asked me at the very beginning, what's that moment that you can reflect on now that changed things? And it was becoming a mother. Because after I became a mother and I was holding on so tightly to my corporate job, I was married to my son's dad, and that I had this job where I was traveling. My identity was so wrapped up in my job as to who I was, how I was like bringing in all this revenue. We were working with lovely clients. I was responsible for a team. I was responsible for like not just my team, but the other people in the organization, because I was responsible for a selling thing, right? And then one night after work, I went home and I said, I don't want to be married to you anymore. And I had a massive mortgage. I had a job where I was traveling and I had a 2-year-old. And that's how my first marriage ended. So I'm like, I had no plan.
So hang on a second. For a second, I thought you were talking about Craig there, but I've now got to the end of the story. So yeah, okay, I understand why you said your son's dad. So hang on a second, you were talking about everything to do with work.
Yeah.
And then you came home and you said, I want to be married to you.
So the connection from a work point of view and what we were saying about taking risks and knowing yourself. And, I think it's a pattern of behavior for people like me and you perhaps, where we've created this life for ourselves through a journey of growing and building a business on like in multiple ways. Between Craig and I, we've sold and bought and built lots and lots of businesses. But that risk taking and that, I don't think it's even a calculated risk because I don't even go through that process. I just have this knowing within me. It's going to be all right.
Was your husband surprised?
Yeah, probably in the bluntness of my, articulation of like, no, sorry, I'm going. But, I think it was. But I couldn't hold on to everything that I had. And that was the thing. And I knew deep down for a long time that I couldn't do it. But I was putting this pretense on, again, the high I thing in me. Like I was this person externally and this person like within the four walls of my home, and I was like, there's a massive inner conflict. So I think that trust and that knowing comes to a head at certain points. And then I kind of go, that's it. Something changes.
Yeah, because what's interesting to me is that when I asked you to articulate the skill, you said trust, self-trust. That seems to be at odds with the younger Del requiring external validation, because if you require external validation on something that you're thinking of doing, that you haven't got that self-trust. So that speaks to me of tremendous amount of growth and development.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've consciously worked on, or something that has just kind of over time?
It's organically happened. It's not something that I have consciously gone, well, I used to be this type of person and now I want to be this. It was never like that. It's just been a series of situations and experiences that have led to me being able to articulate it. I'm quite happy to talk about all that stuff. I think it's important to share it because there's this perception that you should or shouldn't be something. And I was very much like that when I was younger. And that's probably, if I'm really honest about it, that's why I got married the first time, because that's the thing that you should do.
Should.
Yeah.
Fuck should.
Fuck should. Yeah, absolutely. And now I'm like, no, it's fine. Everything will be fine. But yeah. And it does work out, like I can't, yeah, I don't, and I'm not scared. Like people talk about fear, don't they? Like fear will hold us back and, push through fear and be out of your comfort zone, especially in the coaching circles that I move in. Like it sounds dead easy, but it's blooming not. And there's a massive difference between knowing these things and actually doing it and living it and breathing it and, really going for it.
So this is now, that was then 21, 22 years old, leaving university.
Yeah.
How did the next step reveal itself to you?
So again, I don't know whether it's naive or like pure genius, but after university, I graduated with a 2-1. I then got a job at the university. So like European Development Fund, as it was years ago, used to give various organisations budgets to spend to drive local economic growth. It was like an ERDF funded project, and I did a bit of work on that. So we would go out and see businesses, try and sign them up. And there was maybe 4 or 5 of us, all graduates of some kind, whether you'd done a PhD or like an undergrad degree or whatever. And it was brilliant because we kind of had free money from Europe. And we were like, hey, you can have this as support to employ people, develop your skill set, all of that stuff. Brilliant. And then that contract came to an end and I was like, now what do I do? And my sister had moved to Manchester. So she's a completely different character to me. She was like, I'm off, like early on. Whereas I'm like, I need to stay home. So she was like, I'm off. I'm going to live in Manchester. So she studied to become a social worker. So she was working for a private foster care company way back when. I was like, I'm going to go and stay with her for the weekend. And I'm going to take my CV with me. And I'm going to stay an extra couple of days and I'm going to go around the recruitment agencies. And that's what I did. And I landed a job as an account exec for a marketing agency who at the time was part of News International. So they used to own Sky TV, they used to own News of the World and The Sun and those kind of papers. And it was brilliant because it was the first kind of time. I lived with my sister for the first few weeks. And I was ready to go at that point. Yeah, I was ready to spread my wings a little bit. And I had this security of a proper job. And it was the bestest of best jobs. So the first day I was at my new job, that was all fine. And then I'd stayed behind for something. And the girl that was sat opposite me, she rang me on my mobile and she's like, are you going to the pub for a drink? And I was like, yeah, all right then. So we stayed out drinking until whatever stupid time it was. And then that was it. And I worked there for 3 years and it was just really good fun. Early 20s, in an agency environment, in Manchester city centre. It was just brilliant. Until it made us redundant.
Oh. How would you describe the relationship with your sister?
That's an interesting question. I never really thought about that. So we get on really well. She's a very different character to me. She's very she's a ta-da kind of person. Whereas I'm not. I'll sit quietly and then I'll speak. We're not in each other's pockets, but I know if I need her, she'll be there. I think when I was younger, I probably resented her a little bit And I remember conversations with my parents to say, why don't you ever tell her that she needs to study more? Because she was like, she's a bit of a rebel. She's like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm just going to wing it and I'm doing my own thing. Whereas I was the one who was very compliant, I guess, as a youngster, doing all of the things, where she was like, nah, fuck this.
That birth order has such a profound impact on our development, doesn't it?
Yeah. But like, you know, she's got a really good job now. You know, she's proper. Like, she's got a very responsible role in what she does. I just can't quite imagine her doing it. So yeah, it's good. And I think we feel very close, even though we don't see each other all of the time. She lives fairly near where I am here. She's about maybe 30 miles away. So she doesn't live in North Wales either. So yeah, it's good.
So you were made redundant?
Yeah.
What did that feel like?
Fine. I didn't really, yeah.
The honeymoon phase wore off fairly quickly, did it?
So we had offices in London because we used to do all of the telephony competition lines for things like Breakfast TV. We used to run the competition lines or the entry lines for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire when it was like back at Chris Tarrant era. We had an office in Bristol and we had an office in Manchester, and they closed the Manchester office. And they were like, oh, well, do you want to come down and manage the account that you're managing from Bristol? And I was like, no, because I've just bought a house and I like it up here. It's easy for me to get back to Wales from Manchester. No, I don't want to. And then I went to another agency. Yeah, so I've been promoted a couple of times. And I think when I got made redundant, I must have been, I think I was an account manager by the time I left. Went to another agency as an account manager, completely different agency, very small. There was only 14 of us rather than a kind of big corporate beast. And I loved it. And I got the bug for it. And I loved agency life. Staying late, running campaigns, having a deadline, like arguing with designers. Like I loved it. And this family feel of this agency, I really liked. And we used to do things together and go out together. And I had, again, carried on studying. So I'd done my Institute of Direct Marketing diploma while I was at my first job. I knew I wanted to do more. Like, this thing was coming out in me again. Like, come on, like, we can achieve more. I was like, right, the thing from a direct marketing point of view is financial services, way back when. So I left that really nice small agency, handed in my notice to go and work for a bigger agency back in Manchester. And I was there for 4 weeks. I was like, I hate this. I'm reading terms and conditions for like this bank and that bank, and it's just boring. And the creative director would march around like rah, shouting. And I was like, oh no, I don't like this. And we went for a night out with my old agency pals. I was like, I hate it. Can I come back? And they were like, yeah, come back. It's fine. You can start on Monday. So that was brilliant.
So what were you looking for when you moved?
More experience, I think, is what the thing that I was looking for when I moved, and to work on bigger, better accounts and bigger, better clients. But actually all I was doing was reading bloody terms and conditions for banks, and it was just, and sending quite a sale out and stuff like that. It's boring. Yeah, I much preferred the smaller agency. We were very agile. We would get involved at a much higher level with the clients. So yeah, it was good. And then I job hopped again. So as people do in sort of that career, we move from one agency to get promoted to another one, I moved from that last really nice family agency to somewhere different as a senior account manager. And that's where I kind of flourished, really. That's where I had a senior account manager role, an account director role, a head of role, and then I was on the board. So yeah.
On the board. Another way you just kind of throw that into the conversation. Did your decision to study psychology help in any of this?
No, not that I can think of now, because it was just, for me, getting a degree was a tick in the box so that you could put the next step in place, take the next step that you needed to. So like all of that time, I was looking at what's the next step, what's the next step, what's the next step. And then when I'd got to this place that I thought I wanted to be, and being on the board and having a very responsible job and going and traveling and, you know, winning multi-million-pound contracts with big blue chip clients, and then all the game of negotiating with procurement people. And I loved it. Loved it. It was like, now what? And that's when, I'd had Thomas by that time.
Well, I was going to say, at what time in what you've just gone through did you get married and have Thomas?
I had Thomas when I was ahead of. So in my career, I was heading up client delivery, sales, all of the external elements of the agency, if you like. And then I took 9 months off and didn't really think that I would want to take more than that 9 months. I knew I wanted to go back because the MD at the time, she was doing 4 days because she had a child. I was like, I'll take some of that, please. And that didn't work for me in that role because I had, a team of 10 people reporting into me. And it was like, I can't work Friday as well. So at the time, I would be salaried for 4 days and then I'd put a timesheet in for the Friday and then they'd pay me for the Friday too. So that's how it worked.
So you got to the top and you didn't like the view?
No. At that point, I was probably living on the edge of burnout, really, because I felt this thing as a mum, like I wanted to be there. But I was away 3, maybe 4 days a week sometimes with going to London to service the clients that we were working with. And I was leaving him and then he could start to talk by the time I was there and he'd be, mummy home, mummy home. And I'd be legging it down the platform at Euston to try and catch the train. And I was just knackered, And then that role probably contributed greatly towards the breakdown of my first marriage because I felt like I was holding it on so tightly and I could see my ex-husband doing more with my son and I was like, I want to do that. That's my thing to do. So there was like resentment that built and built, not the only reason, but part of the reason, for sure it was. And then, I went home that night and one of the nights, I was like, I don't want to be married anymore.
With what you've said about Thomas's complex needs, that kind of puts an additional weight on that decision that you were going to be a single parent.
But at the time, I didn't know because I only had him and he was 2 when that conversation happened. And I had no idea. That only came to light when he started school and people were like, oh, he's a bit more needy than the other kids. And I was like, well, he's younger. He's nearly 12 months younger than the oldest kid in your class. So yeah, he's going to be needy because he's only just turned 4. So that didn't happen until like maybe year 1, beginning of year 2. And they were like, he's showing signs of being a bit spectrumy. I was like, what? Yeah. And then that was just the whole chaotic scene at that point. Then it just spiraled from there on.
Just going back to that, one of the nights we went home and said, I don't want to be married to you anymore. Was that an attempt to make the work situation better by changing something outside of work? And I guess the question behind the question is, at what point did you say, so you said to your husband, I don't want to be married to you. How long after that did you go to the job and say, I don't want to be married to you either?
So let me work it out in my head. Probably 2012 was when I had that conversation. And it took me until 2017 to start my own thing.
Did it get any better at work? Did it get any easier?
2012, I said, I don't want to be married. It took me until 2014 to say, I don't want this job. And I ended up moving and dropping probably a good 40, 50% salary to go and work somewhere differently because it was really challenging in that interim period. When I was traveling up and down, I was ringing my mum and dad saying, can you come down tomorrow because I need to be in London? And they'd toddle off and they'd come here, they'd pack up their things, bring the dog, and they'd camp out at my house for the 3 days that I was in London. And it kind of got to a stage where I was like, this is just nuts, this. My solution to the problem that I have is to get a job where I don't need to travel. So that job that I then secured was a head of role in an organisation called the Manchester Growth Company. And that was my first foray, if you like, into business growth, business support, how that whole thing works. Even though I'd done elements of that previously with the job after university, with the RDF funding, and the job that I'd done in between university places with supporting that kind of career development in the water board when people had been made redundant, that part of my life at Manchester Growth Company was the transition into doing what I do now.
It sounds to me that you did something there from moving from the job where you had a lot of travel, you paid very well, to a job where you didn't have to travel so much, but you were paid less. As something which seems to be fairly common in these conversations with guests is that you created space of a sort. Because why all of your time is taken up with traveling and working, there's no space, but took a 50% drop in salary. What was that like for you? How were you able to manage that? Because that's a problem, isn't it? Is that you can get to a state where you think, I don't like the situation that I'm in, I want to change. But we have, the older you get, the more responsibility you have, the more obligations you have. How did you navigate that such a significant drop in salary?
By the time I worked for Manchester Growth Company, I'd met Craig.
Okay.
So Craig had then moved in, and it felt like I had not a comfort blanket, but some level of security there.
How did you meet, out of interest?
At work, actually. So he's a software engineer by profession, and I was head of client delivery. So he used to head up IT. I used to head up client delivery. We used to have proper clanging, shouting matches. Not shouting matches, but quite vocal disagreements, I shall say. So yeah, we met at work. Craig had moved in by that time.
What did you see in him?
Oh gosh, what did I see in him? His drive, his ambition, his intelligence. I admired in him. And he'll say it was my wit and my charm and my chivalrous good looks. Those two, obviously.
Yes, obviously.
But so by that time, I felt like I had this ability to manage that, because we'd moved into the house that I had as the married home. Craig had then come on the mortgage, various things like that had happened administratively.
Yes.
In terms of our life. Yeah, and I felt quite settled. And I think I rationalised it in my own head, dropping that amount of salary, because I still went in as a head of role, and that it was public funded money. Of course, public sector don't have the same amount of money. All of those things were kind of the things that I allowed me to rationalise my decision.
Rationalise it.
Yeah. So yeah, did that for maybe 18 months. And then thought, I can't travel to Manchester either. This is a flipping nightmare. So what should be a 25, 30-minute journey was just ridiculous. So again, at the time, Craig was working away at another business that he was involved with. Monday to Thursday, I would be on my own with Thomas again. So the same thing would happen. I would be getting the train from Manchester up to Chorley, getting in the car, whizzing back to nursery, or we used to call it hub club, so breakfast and after school club at school. And he'd be there with his little coat on and his little book bag waiting for me. And I would come on in the car quickly, the ladies want to go home. And it still felt like that anxious kind of on edge rushing thing. So I can't do this either.
It's almost like you hadn't got the result that you were looking for from making that change.
Yeah.
Good realization, yeah.
So then I job hopped again. I met somebody that worked for a grounds maintenance business, and he was like, oh, we need a bit of marketing. I was like, all right then. So I did that for 12 months. It was a franchised company. They were the franchisor, and then we were bringing on new franchises. So that was quite interesting process and tendering for things. And it was great because I had a background of working with corporate. So tendering is, a skill set, let's say. And then I kind of got to the end of what I could do there, really. And a job came up at another agency in Preston, which is closer to home. I was like, it was an account director role. So I was like, I can do that with my eyes closed. And again, in hindsight, and it was after the MD had said to me, actually, we really wanted you. But at the time, I was like, I didn't realise that. And I was selling all of my things, and they must have thought, yeah, we're onto a good one here. Come this way. I was like, I can't do this. I can't be an account director for you. I'm really sorry. Because it was just, I don't know, I felt contained, I felt clipped, I felt like I was capable of more. Craig and I then had a conversation while we were on holiday. I was like, it's ridiculous that they can't do this, and they can't say that they're getting new clients because they're not doing this, that and the other. And he was like, well, why don't you go and help them as a consultant or as a freelancer, And that's what I did. My business was originally created to help digital and creative agencies to attract and convert more clients. It's the case of couple of shoes in many, many instances. That they're great at doing all the marketing and selling stuff for clients, they're not great at it themselves. And because that's what I'd done for so many years, I knew how to do it.
I don't know if you've been conscious of it. That one of my jobs, if I have a job, so to speak, other than just being in great conversations with guests, is to pick up on things that my guests say consistently. And one of the things that I've heard you say at almost every point of transition and change and zag and whatever is that you knew inside of yourself that you were capable of so much more. And I can't help but reflect back on the environment you were brought up in home with your mum and dad saying, you can be anything, you can have anything. And although your initial kind of tentative step out of the nest, if you like, at one level resulted in a fall, that was just so internalized in you at almost a cellular level that great things were possible. I just think what a wonderful testament to your parents of bringing you up in that environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Like my dad is like, he's 76 and he's been poorly he's recovered now, but he went through some cancer treatment a couple of years ago. I can't imagine him not being here because he is absolutely like my guiding light to some extent, because even though now I absolutely treasure the relationship that Craig and I have, my dad will always be that person, that very grounded, very centered person in my life. And I think that relationship is manifesting itself in the same way between me and my son. And I think it's beautiful.
Do you ever talk, not that I want to get morbid, but do you ever talk to your dad about advancing age and what it will be like?
Yeah. So I was like, make sure you leave us some instructions, make sure everything is in order. And like even yesterday, so they're talking about downsizing. So my mum and dad now live in the property my dad was born in, that they've renovated and they live there. And it's like an old farmhouse, I guess, with bits of extensions added on. So it's a big property for them to look after. There's like some land and various things. And they're talking about downsizing into like a smaller bungalow, and those kind of conversations. And we were talking on the phone yesterday because they'd seen the estate agent and then they were talking about, how we'll finance it. And my dad said to me, well, we haven't got much time left, I was like, I can't say things like that. And he's like, well, I'm stating facts. So we're very open about it, and he's like, I don't want a big bloody fuss, this is what I want, and I don't want a funeral, and I don't want this, and I don't want that. So it's very open discussion in our family.
In your family, yeah. Yeah, that's good.
And it's nice, it's like, I like it. One of the things, and I'm guessing that this podcast episode will come out after Christmas, is like, my dad had 2 girls, me and my sister. I've had 1 boy. My sister doesn't have children. So my family name is Evans. And there's been generations of Evanses, if you like, living in the house that my mum and dad live in. I bought my dad a little kit to record his journey, if you like, his experience, our family history, because I would absolutely, God forbid, touch wood, everything will be fine for a number of years. But if I lose that, it won't be there because I don't know that level of detail because I've moved away, and I think it's so precious. I need to make sure that Thomas has the ability to go and get it.
Have you thought about finding a way of your dad doing that in conversation with somebody else?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
It's hard to tap into stuff that you've lived with and without sort of external questions or
it's challenging. And I think, for us, it's been something that I've toyed with for a good couple of years. And I looked at somebody writing a book for him and all those kind of things. I'm like, I don't know when the realization came. I was like, he can record it. That's so much easier. It's like, yes. So that, yeah.
So account director is too small for you. You could do it with your
Yeah.
do your eyes closed. You said a sense about having been clipped, that you know that you're capable for more. What was in your mind and your body about what that more could be?
Running my own empire. Like, I wanted to be master of my own destiny. I think I don't like being told what to do. Like Craig used to say about me, God, you're so independent. It's annoying. And I think, again, looping it back, I think that's probably from the things that we've talked about already in terms of growing up. But it's that, I, I don't know, I've got this inner knowing I'm capable of more. And now as I get older, I'm going to be 50 next year. So I think this whole conversation about like, what's my legacy? What am I leaving? Is different from when I was in my early 30s, maybe that, I wanted a house. I wanted to make sure that we could pay the mortgage. I wanted to feel secure.
Mm-hmm.
But now I have those things. I feel secure in my relationships, in my, I don't know, status is a weird word. It makes me feel a bit ick kind of saying that. But like in terms of who I am,
Yeah.
in terms of what I know I want for my life, I've got those things. I'm very grateful for all of the amazing things that we have. So I'm like, what's now? And this thing, this mission that I have, I could easily articulate that a couple of years ago, but now it's about legacy and impact and how I can leverage that. It's not about, that's what it's about.
Is it possible, do you think, to get to that sooner, or do we have to have a life lived to get to that point?
I don't know. For me, I've definitely had to live through that. I wouldn't have been able to get to this point when I was in my early 20s. Probably my ego would have been too big because I wanted to do well and showcase all of my brilliance, Whereas now, that don't bother me. Yeah, I'm happy to, of course, like I like standing on stages, like speaking is a big thing for me. So I like going and speaking at events. I like that because, again, the I in me.
Yeah, I was going to say the high I into there.
Yeah. So like the showcase thing. But actually, could I live without that? Yeah, I could. Could I get up every single day and still do what I do if I didn't do that? Yeah, I could.
But you couldn't not do what you're doing with female founders.
No, I believe it in my soul because there's so much out there at the moment. Like, you can have it all, of course you can be superwoman, although it's not necessarily articulated that way. That's the noise. There's so much of it. And actually, I am very capable and I want this too. They're not two mutually exclusive things. It's they're together.
No, I get that.
People will say, well, why is it about female founders? Because that's what I resonate with. That was me. I've been on that journey. I've had to compete really, really hard. And I remember when I was in that agency on the board, the finance director, and I was querying something on the P&L. And I can't remember what it was now. And I was saying, well, this isn't on because we've brought in X amount of revenue and, the costs are too high. I'm not in control of those, whatever it was. And he said, God, you're so emotional, aren't you? I was like, oh God, like things like that. And I know I'm going back in time and things are different now. They're not that different, but he wasn't like an older guy. And even like now, I've been out to events of, various different events. Who do you work for, Livy? And I'm not that kind of person, but I'm like, if I have to bring out the big guns and demonstrate who I am and what we're capable of, then I will. But I don't feel the need to.
No. So at what point, you said about your first foray working for yourself, you were helping agencies get and keep clients themselves.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize that you were starting to control your destiny, but it wasn't going to be that way?
Yeah.
What was that journey like, that zag?
I kind of got to a stage where, I don't know, maybe three years in, I was like, this is good. I was running group programs, working one-to-one. It was fine. But there was always something, like we'd teach the business element of it. We'll do this, then that'll happen, then do that, and that'll happen. And there was always this thing about people not really taking action. And I then worked for a different coach as an associate for her. And she specialized in helping service businesses. So it was like a natural progression for me, because agencies, creative or digital, whatever they do, they're selling time and expertise for a fee. So service businesses inherently do that. There are more female founders setting up service-based businesses because the barrier to entry is so low. There's no NPD, no product. Those costs are much lower. So there are many more female-led service businesses. And that was the start of that, because doing the associate work for her, I was working with nutritionists, I was working with consultants, I was working with marketeers. So even though I'm a marketeer by profession, I've got letters after my name and all of those like nice things that I will have done when I was much younger. When it comes to doing it for your own business, it's a very, very different thing, right? Like all of the stuff from way back when starts to rear its head about, what people are going to say about me if I start showing my prices, and what if I charge more for what I'm doing? All of those things come up. And that really kind of gave me some meaty stuff to go at, really. And that's how it evolved into the female arena, really. Just naturally evolved into doing that. And it was something that I could resonate with. It was something that I was very familiar with, this balance of childcare or caring responsibilities. That doesn't necessarily mean, being a parent. It could be that you're caring for a loved one or a parent or whoever. But that generally falls to the woman. So, it was a very natural evolution, I guess, of where my business was going.
Was that your first exposure to the world of coaching, being an associate coach, or had you had coaching yourself?
When I gained that first board position at that agency, they paid for me to have some coaching sessions. That was really, really powerful. I was like, "Oh, I like this."
What do you remember liking particular?
She wasn't necessarily a very purist coach. She was helping me navigate conversations. I'd been promoted over and above my peers, which is challenging in a number of ways. So that was the reason that they had given me this opportunity to work with somebody on leadership, on my leadership styles. That was my first understanding of DISC. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And it was at that point that the whole loop background to the psychology degree started to kind of come up. Okay. So I'd had that experience that had really supported me during that phase. And some of the conversations with her about exploring who I was, what I wanted, where my frustration lay, why there was elements of conflict with people like the FD, like all of that were elements that we explored together. And I think, not that I'm blaming her, but again, I kind of had this realization of understanding a bit more of a deeper level who I was. And I had, I guess, more certainty in myself that then led to conversations like, I don't want to be married anymore.
Just coming back to what you said fairly early in the conversation about this thing around self-trust, were you already starting to recognize that was growing in you before you started working with a coach?
Yeah, because I would sit in board meetings sometimes and be like, just listening to what somebody said, and I was like, I don't, like, why do you even think that? I can see the data here and it just doesn't stack up. And I didn't have the skill set necessarily to not challenge it, but I would have been more blunt than I would be now, or I wouldn't have got to the point to explore that detail in the same way as I could now. Like, I would have probably been a bit more defensive, a bit more brash with it, a bit more, that's probably why it kind of reined me in a little bit. It's like, oh, she's a bit tetchy.
But emotional.
It's emotional, yeah.
So you became an associate coach. So it's almost like the student became the teacher. So you're an associate coach, and then you started to evolve more into doing that.
Yeah. The whole thing of then, because at the time, even before I was an associate, I was teaching this business strategy. Yeah? So I was running groups, and there was this thing all the time that people would come back to the group the month after and be like, well, I haven't done this. I'm like, why haven't you done it? You know, like, cracking the whip was possible, yes, but that still didn't help in some instances. So it's like, what's going on? What's stopping them taking that action? And that was the thing that kind of sparked this, like, oh, I need to put my fingers in that bit.
So are you, what are you talking about there? Is it what's between the ears?
Yeah, like what goes on, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're doing, how our thoughts impact our behavior, all of that stuff would go on. And I'm like, this is my thing. And that's how I found it.
Labels, schmabels. But would you describe yourself? Would you use the word mindset in any explanation of what you do? A mindset coach?
Absolutely. So we will always talk about blending the business strategy and tactics with a sprinkling of mindset magic.
I love that.
And it's like, I kind of get a bit bored of the whole mindset, like what's the other word? Mindfulness, and like self-care, being authentic, those conversations. I'm like, bored. I don't like the words. I don't like the resonance of it. I don't call myself a psychologist because I've only got an undergraduate degree in psychology. Like that was a degree. I didn't train as a psychologist. But I know now that that is fundamental to everything that we do. And actually, one of the, like the projects or the pieces of work that you do, like
Your portfolio.
yeah, or like the things that you learn, like you go through phases and you might learn this month and you might learn that the next month.
Curriculum.
Yeah. So like part of the curriculum was about neuroscience. And I really, really loved that. But it was one of the modules that I walked out of in an exam. I was like, I can't do this. Just wasn't in the right headspace. Now it is absolutely one of the things that is key to how we teach sales strategy, sales tactics. We have to have an understanding of what's going on up here that drives our behavior to do something. And sometimes it is in the circles that I move in, sometimes it's talked about too lightly, like it's, I'm fixed now. Like I've got my mindset sorted now. It doesn't work like that. It's an ever evolving process.
I mean, I hear what you're saying about your lack of resonance with those words. I guess all of those words that you use, like mindset, authenticity, and whatever, they're kind of just attempting to say that actually it's what's going on between your ears that is the most important thing. Well, however you want to describe it, if you're not working on what's going on between your ears, then 95% of this, you're only working with 5% of what you've actually got access to.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we develop a lot with the clients that we work with is that ability to control the inner voice. So, I remember reading The Chimp Paradox when I was at university. I remember talking about some of our beliefs and the way that works. And it's so, so key to how we move forward now, controlling that negative voice. I still have negative thoughts now. Everybody has negative thoughts. It's my ability and my understanding of the strategies to be able to flip that, if you like, and have control over my own mind, not in a kind of spooky kind of way, but having that ability to move myself from that place or from that chatter. So, for me, like some days, if I know if I get really tired, if I have been delivering too much and haven't planned in a more quiet day, I will struggle in those instances. And that negative voice starts chattering really loudly, but I know what I need to do to quieten it.
Is that something that just works for you, or is that something that you can share?
So I think for me, there are a couple of things that I've learned and that we teach clients. So it's your ability to capture that negative chatter in the first instance, and realize and have the self-awareness that it is happening. Once you catch that, then you understand what's happened directly before that little negative voice has happened. What's triggered it? Is it the fact that I'm tired? Is it the fact that somebody said something to me? Is the fact that, I don't know, like an instance where a client hasn't renewed or something? Those kind of things can trigger that little voice in my head. At that point, I know, and I can do it really quickly now because I'm used to doing it. But at that point, I need to look at the facts. So if the negative voice is saying, oh, you must be a bit shit as a coach if a client doesn't want to renew with you, what are the facts? Well, actually, we measure a client's, we call it a scorecard. So we measure their progress on a monthly basis based on the KPIs that we set together. So I've got that I can go back to. I have feedback from clients, in terms of we collect those, I screenshot it. I'm kind of a little bit anal in terms of screenshotting those kind of things. I can read and review those things. And then I can sanity check how valid is that point where I'm saying you're a shit coach. The facts are that I'm not because I've got all of this evidence. So what's really going on, So yeah, having the ability to apply that strategy at a point where that voice sparks up is really, really powerful. And in the first instance, it is something that takes longer. So I've got to think back, I've got to write it down, like when I first started doing it, and it was a technique that somebody taught me that has its fundamentals in cognitive behavioral therapy. So again, linking back to the psychology stuff. Writing it down is really powerful because it's using most of your senses to do that. But now I can do it like I might have to have a few conversations with myself. I can do it really quickly now. I know when I'm having that chatter. And it's probably, if I have to score it as to how loud it is, it's probably a 3 or a 4, where it used to be like a strong 8, 9 or 10.
A strong 8, 9 or 10. And something that we keep hearing and don't do anything about. The only way you can reduce the volume, would you say it's just the volume that's gone down, or would you say that it's the regularity has gone down too?
Both. So I think the regularity of it is much less, and the shoutiness of that is definitely not as loud. Definitely not.
The listener of this episode of the podcast may well be a female founder. And listener, if you resonate with the term female founder, it's been a pleasure to have you in this conversation with us. Del, just talk to the female founder who's listening from the context of you don't know where they are in their founder journey because it's a long one.
Yeah.
From inception to death. I think that's the. Well, no, but in terms of the journey, because the being a founder is just a microcosm of living life, and it's so. What's the best question you could ask the female founder who's listening to this episode right now?
What do you want?
What do you want?
What do you want? What you want. Not what other people think you should want. Not what your parents think you should want. Not what your husband, your partner, your kids, what do you want?
And what I love about that question, Del, what I absolutely adore about that question is it's the question that we should all ask ourselves all the time. Don't wait until you're 56 years old and you've had a couple of failed businesses. I'm talking about myself here, by the way, just in case there's any doubt.
Right.
And a divorce and whatever. And I haven't waited until now. I have an idea of what I want. But that question, what do you want, is just such a simple, short question, but it is so profound because it unlocks everything else.
Yes. And if you are clear on what the outcome you desire is, then you can put a plan together for that, right? Come on. And that's, again, I think this is why Craig and I gelled so well together. That's what we're like. We'll make a decision, like you're talking about failed businesses. We lost a business last year that did £28 million a year. And literally it was gone overnight for whatever reason. But then we made a decision to say, right, do we want to fight for it or do we not? What's the thing that we want? Yeah. And it's always there. And I think, again, in terms of self-leadership and the ability to self-coach, it's so it's just a beautiful thing. And actually, when you talked about, from inception all the way through to death, everything's figure outable. We all die the same. And it's, what do you want? And if that's security, because I was talking about it with somebody last week that I think the last 4 or 5 years, because we're coming up to 2025, aren't we? That, it's 5 years ago since the whole world went into lockdown, and that off the back of that, there were so many new business owners and entrepreneurs because we saw the opportunity and we did really well. But now, we're seeing, in my view, some of those people saying, do you know what? I'm done. It's too much because we've been through the cost of living, the recent budget in terms of employing people. It's hard work, right? Nobody sets up their business to earn less money and
Work more hours. Yeah.
and not enjoy it. So come back round to, what is it you want? If you can't articulate it, you have to be able to articulate that first. It's one of the first questions I will ask on like a discovery call or a sales call. Yeah. What do you want?
What do you want, Del?
What do I want? I often answer that with like some peace and quiet. What do I want? I have what I wanted. And what I want is for other people to realize that they can have it as well. And it's like, yeah, that's made me a bit emotional in that.
You looked up and took a sharp intake of breath, so it's obviously...
Yeah. Because it's hard,
Mm.
Gosh, I don't know why that affected me so much, but I think it's because I believe it. Like I really, really believe it. God, I didn't expect that. That's why I believe it in my bones. Like that's why I'm so forthright about it. And there are so many women that just don't have that belief. Like, I want to say, come on, I've got you. Come on.
So the female founder that is listening to this, that wants to find out more about you, how to work with you, how do they do that?
So I am very easy to find on the Tinternet. So I am on LinkedIn as Del Parsons. I am on Instagram as Del Parsons Coaching and on Facebook too. And the website is again very creatively named as delparsonscoaching.co.uk. And we do and deliver lots and lots of free training as well. So we don't just work with the female founders who are already in established businesses. We have support and resources and programs for women who are just starting out and have that same belief as I did, like I am capable of this stuff. And actually, when you've had a really successful corporate career and then you come into running your own business, like you don't know what you don't know, right? And until you are having to do it, we've got their back, anything that you need to know. So a really good example of that is a lady who used to be a head of brand marketing. And she was like, I don't know how to send an email campaign. Why would you? You wouldn't know, right? But those are the kind of things. So we have plenty of resources on the website, loads of free resources. And yeah, if this resonates, then my inbox is always open. So yeah, send me a DM.
You were recommended to come onto this show by Nina Taylor, I think.
Yes.
So how do you two know each other?
So she's a client of mine. She is in our mastermind program. So yes, that's how we know each other.
Amazing. Well, that's testament to the work that you do. I don't know if you know, we've been speaking for nearly an hour and 40 minutes. Time's just whizzed by. It's been such a joy to share the little bits of your non-straight line journey that we've been able to explore together. Are there any parts of your zigzag journey through life that we haven't talked about that you'd like to kind of leave with us?
I guess there's more zigzagging to come, I'm like, bring it on.
Yeah.
And I think that I embrace it. I actively search for it, And I remember saying to a coach that I work with a couple of years ago, it feels too comfortable. I don't like it. And I'm like, why am I doing this to myself?
You're searching for discomfort.
I feel comfort in the discomfort because I know that the way it plays out, stuff works out. And because I've got that trusting, I'm good at shaking it up.
Yeah, it's almost like I briefed you what to say at the end of the episode, because that is absolutely the message that I want to get out with this podcast, that this acceptance of that where you are and who you are right now is absolutely perfect. Because if it wasn't, you would be someone else and you would be somewhere else.
Yeah.
So just recognize that where you are and who you are is okay. It's not to say that you won't grow and you won't zig and you won't zag and you go somewhere else. But it comes back to that question that you said is like, what do you want? If you're not, I hesitate to use the word happy, but if you're not, what's the word I'm looking for? That if you don't like, because you don't like it, you're not fully accepting. It's like do you know what I mean? If you see something like if you see something bigger in yourself, if you see that you're capable of more, then how to start moving towards that is you got to ask yourself the question, what do you want?
Yeah. And it's joyful. I love it. And I think having Marie Forleo, I don't know whether you are aware of her. She's like an American coach, if you like, very, very well regarded. She has a book called Everything is Figure Outerable.
I love it.
I'm just like, oh yeah. Like, is that trademarked?
If not on your own, then in conversation and dialogue with other people, because we're all on this journey together. Yeah. Thank you. I do have a couple of questions which I ask every guest at the end of episodes. So the first question is, how can the listener and I help you the most right now?
So how can you help me the most? If any of this has resonated, then please just send me a DM just to say, do you know what? Like, I get that, because it is, I love having that conversation. The other way in which you can help, connect with me on social, share this podcast episode so people can hear the journey, because again, there is power in using our voices to share this and to communicate with others who may be further ahead or, further behind where we are in our journey. So that is absolutely one of it. Like, share and speak about it is what I would say.
Wonderful. The other question is, who's not the same question that I asked Nina that led to you and I having this conversation? Whose non-straight line journey do you want to hear?
Who's not straight line journey? So there is a lady that I work with called Danny Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about herself being famous because she is the queen bee. And she is one of the most beautiful, beautiful souls I have ever had the fortune to meet. And she has a brilliant story.
Do you know her enough to be able to introduce her to me?
I do.
Well, if you could do that, that'd be great. It'd be a joy to speak to her. Well, I mean, all that being said, on behalf of the listener and myself, Del, thank you so much for sharing a non-straight line journey with us. And I never really know how to end these conversations. It's just a little bit weird. So thank you and goodbye. Right? It's just the start of a conversation. Yeah, this is the start of a conversation. We're connected now, and there's no getting rid of me.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. It's been really great, actually, and being able to just explore some of those things because you listened and picked up on things, and I'm sorry for the crying bit. Or not sorry, really. But...
No, never apologize for that. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Not a Straight Line. If this conversation helped to reorient your internal compass or inspired you in any way, please let us know by heading to podcast.notastraightline.life/rate and leave a rating and review. Thanks, as always, to Matthew Bliss of MB Podcast Services for his exquisite engineering of this episode. If you'd like him to help you with your podcast, contact details are in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or there's someone whose non-straight line journey you'd just love to hear, then please visit podcast.notastraightline.life/guest. Thanks for being here with me, and I'll see you next week for another amazing, deep, inspiring non-straight line journey. Love you.